have with us Chitra Panikkar, Professor of Bangalore University, a veteran academic and a well-known figure in academic circles. Professor Chitra Panikkar teaches at the Department of English, Bangalore University. After her PhD work on James Joyce and Marcel Proust from the Department of English, Kerala University, she worked as resident scholar in James Joyce Foundation, Zurich, Switzerland for a year. On her return to India, she worked as lecturer in the Center for Comparative Literature in Hyderabad, Central University for 8 years, and as reader in the Center for Applied Linguistics and Translation Studies in the same university for 6 years, before she joined the Department of English, Bangalore University. Her areas of interest span literary and cultural theory, translation studies, and Indian literatures. Joyce studies being her specialization. She has translated and published 8 chapters of Joyce's Ulysses into Malayalam and continues to translate literary and critical texts from Malayalam into English and vice versa, while theorizing those practices. She was on a fellowship of the Department of Culture, Government of India for 2 years and was an associate fellow at the Indian Institute of Advanced Study, Shimla. The last few years, as part of a research program sponsored by the UGC, she has been consistently working on questions of identity and has published articles that offer an interdisciplinary perspective on literary texts. Apart from her ongoing interest in curricular revisions and syllabus designing, she has been socially active on issues of gender and caste. Of late, she is also working on a project which examines dementia in literature and art. Apart from that, Professor Chitra is the Dean of Faculty of Foreign Languages, Sree Sankaracharya University, and is on a Scholar in Residence program at Department of English here. The Scholar in Residence program is funded by Kerala Higher Education Council. Hello, Professor Chitra. I'm very happy to be with you now. And you are a female academic who worked outside for some time and worked in many parts of India after your studies in Kerala. And can you just recall your trajectory, especially as a feminist in academia, which has traditionally been a very male bastion?
I started my career as a teacher at the University of Hyderabad way back in 1993, and after that, within the university itself, I changed my discipline from comparative literature to applied linguistics and translation studies, and at a later stage migrated to Bangalore University, where I was at the Department of English. So I had been constantly changing disciplines, which is maybe a rarity in academics because you don't land the kind of disciplines that you can be associated with unless you are also blessed with a stroke of luck. And therefore I've had chances to meet lots of people and also be with issues wherever I had been stationed, first at the University of Hyderabad and then later in Bangalore University. I would say that as a conscious feminist presence, I started operating that way at the Hyderabad Central University when I was warden of the women's hostel there. I used to get very involved with the issues that young women students were with. I was staying very near the hostel, and so students had all the freedom to come and share their experiences and problems with me. And so I became very involved first with personal issues and then later with issues on campus because students tended to trust me with the resolution or at least the handling of whatever their problems were. So I would say that it was Hyderabad and Hyderabad University which actually molded me into an aware, conscious female presence.
Professor Chitra, now I think we can a little bit talk about humanities, and we are all humanists. I mean, humanist academics. No? So my question is, what is the role of humanities in the changing world? So I have in mind Schiller's the famous work, Letters on the Aesthetic Education of Man, Gayatri's work, recent work of aesthetic education in uh, globalization scenario. So, will you be able to tell me something about your thoughts on humanities and its role in the contemporary technological kind of world?
Yeah, I'll start perhaps with the kind of hierarchy that you usually find in the university setup. At the top, you will have the sciences. Just below that, you will have social sciences. And at the lowermost level, you will have humanities placed. And this has been a stratification which has been going on for quite some time. And people in humanities were getting more and more conscious of that. And as a result of this treatment and this consciousness among people who were within humanities, there was always a reference to a crisis in humanities in many of the universities in India and also universities abroad. I tend to take the side of people like Gayatri Spivak. I clearly remember one of the articles she wrote long ago, which says Speaking for Humanities, where she talks about how we don't recognize the value of humanities enough because, according to her, even at the level of primary education, one has to be taught two subjects compulsorily, and one is literature and the other is philosophy. She also says that it brings a certain kind of social consciousness into every citizen, this kind of training, and that would help us be a responsible citizen without actually having to address as to how exactly one ought to be within the system of education. I think this is very vital because she has also been involved with primary school education in Bengal, and her training there as a teacher and as somebody who is supporting students from very poor backgrounds to come into education has also perhaps taught her that it is very vital for people to get into the education system right from the level of primary education with quality education given to them and not just free education given to them. And that, she says, will actually result in the rearrangement of desires. That is the phrase that she uses in order to describe a kind of activist model of an educated person in society. This rearrangement of desires is very much needed in order to function as a person who has been rightly educated. And this, she thinks, can happen only with training in humanities right from the primary school. I am literally taking the ideas from Spivak, but I suppose it's okay because we really have to go by the experience of people who have been in the field for years and who have had um, the the words to address the problem. According to her, stating the problem or being able to state the problem is as important as being conscious of the problem.
Professor Chitra, when we talk about English studies has been evolving over the years, perhaps over the decades. So, yesterday when you were giving the lecture, you talked about the kind of shift. So, probably it's a kind of paradigm shift, and you have this traditional English studies being overshadowed by latest developments, latest developments from various other disciplines. So, are you really happy with this kind of a change? And can you tell me something about that?
As I told you some time ago, I was busy shifting from department to department, and I feel that wherever you are in any of these departments, you can actually do things that you want to do within the department.
Yes.
So, which also takes us to the thin borderlines between disciplines. Actually, I started off as somebody who was working at the Center for Comparative Literature, and at that point I was very convinced of Idas Hermod's words that in India it has to be comparative literature because we are multilingual. We have to evolve our own strategies of teaching literatures and the rest of it, because in theory he had actually, in his book In Theory, he had talked about it in detail. But my experience at the center was very different because there was very little institutional support for this discipline from the government, from universities, etc. So I continued as a kind of isolated person running a nodal center for all the languages and the literature departments in the university, and not being able to do enough there. So it was also because English studies as a discipline had gotten rooted in the university system for decades by then. And there was no way in which it could be thrown out. And I personally believe that as an individual, you cannot go on contributing. There should be a collective. And the government has to be responsible for providing this collective to any university setup. It was meaningless to, carry on as a crusader for a single discipline when you yourself did not believe in thick disciplinary borders. So, therefore, after being there for 8 years, I migrated to the Linguistics and Translation Studies department, and I worked there for 6 years. And I knew that whatever I was doing at the Comparative Literature Center, I could do it even in this department. Because there was a place for translation studies. There was a place for other people to come from other departments through this open elective course and learn about language, culture and society and literature in this department as well. Because we were running a course like that. And then
so
at a later...
had MA then?
Yes, MA, MPhil programs. We also had research students. And then after some time, circumstances of life actually made me choose a different place. So I migrated to Bangalore, where I was within the Department of English Studies, which was actually my parent subject when I was doing my MA.
Some sort of coming back.
And but for me it was not like a coming back, because in a way whatever I was doing there I'm still doing within the English department here.
Okay.
So I don't find a lot of change, but one major change is always there. That is the kind of English studies departments that were there when I studied, which was full of British literature components. Those are not there anymore
Yeah.
as departments of English.
Yeah.
In its place, you will have lots of papers being offered by English departments. And as one of my friends at the Open London University told me some time ago, in India you are doing everything except British literature
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
literatures
Okay.
in departments of English studies,
Okay.
which is actually true.
Yeah.
Because we are doing post-colonial studies, we are doing gender studies, we are doing popular literature and cultural studies, we are doing Latin American literature sometimes,
Yeah.
European literatures,
Yeah.
Indian writing in English, and one token space for the subject called British literature. So, over a period of time, the discipline itself has changed character.
Yes, that's right.
It embraces all kinds of things.
Yeah,
And
and you're very happy about that. And if you were to include something again into this kind of English studies frame, what would you suggest?
I would also suggest elements from philosophy,
All right,
like
all
critical
right.
thinking,
That's
etc.
really good.
Yes,
Yeah,
because you also have people opting for research.
yeah,
It could be an elective, but at some level, it may also be offered as a compulsory subject, because in some of the universities in India, or maybe even in undergraduate colleges, what students don't have training in is actually in ways of critical thinking.
yeah. That's right.
Many students parrot whatever is given in the text. They don't think through texts that
Yes.
they have to study. Their teachers don't encourage them to do it because they themselves are not trained
Yeah.
to do so.
Yeah.
As a result of that, when they come to the level of post graduation or even of research, they really don't know how to indulge in critical thinking,
Yes. Yes.
which should perhaps be absolutely necessary
Yeah.
for a person who has opted for post graduation in a subject or even for a research.
Yeah. Professor Chitra, I actually would like to talk to you on the kind of status of English research in India. So, what are the kind of weaknesses? What are its strengths? And if you are asked for some suggestions on improving our English studies research, what would be yours? I mean, suggestions.
Is right from the beginning, that is, ever since I was part of the university system in India. Luckily for me, I have also been with research students, and I know that they are confronted with problems most of the time because they don't actually have the training to be in the space of research. They opt for research these days because of UGC offering them venues where they can teach at universities, at institutes, and all that. And they go for it because it has also become a lucrative job, the teaching profession.
Yeah.
So they opt for it. But that alone is not enough. They should know what research is. And for that, as I told you some time ago, they need to have training in critical thinking. The teachers who actually are with them during their early years should be able to promote that So where do we start all this? That is the question. So we need to change our education system as a whole, I think, where we promote this kind of thinking right from schools. So at a later stage, after you finish your undergraduate program and when you get into the postgraduate programs in departments within universities, if they tell you, no, you really have to think anew, it's very difficult for students because they don't have the training. They have thought only through the texts that were prescribed to them. Only very few teachers are there who have been in a system which would have helped these teachers themselves know how important it is to promote critical thinking in students. So as a result of that, research suffers a lot. There is a lot of anxiety among research students on how to function within the space of research in universities, and that is actually the weakness of the research wings in many of the universities, that students and sometimes their supervisors also don't know how to function within the space of research and what are to be given to students. The supervisors may not have enough um, awareness of that. With as far as students are concerned, how exactly to follow a line of thinking which we have never been used to um, do, that is also a huge problem. So you see all these confusions within the research space of universities, and this once again can only be stated, it cannot be resolved. But that we now have an awareness where we can state it, that itself I think is a step ahead.
So we have this arrival of cultural studies in English studies, and I also, if you take the PhD researchers, I think most of them are from kind of framework of cultural studies. So, do you think there is a kind of marginalization of literary studies in English studies and focus much more going to cultural studies? So, can you say something on that?
Yeah, there has been a tendency in many of the departments of English, especially. You don't see it in literature departments that are uh, dealing with regional languages. In some departments, you have that, but it's primarily in English departments that you have this tendency to go the cultural studies way. I say
Yeah.
this mainly because uh, there have been teachers in uh, departments of English who have been trained abroad or who have actually evolved a certain way of thinking which will also include a political consciousness of what you are with in terms of literary studies, who would promote cultural studies. But I'm not sure whether students who get into cultural studies are actually uh, very aware of what they have to deal with when they are with subjects which are referred to as part of cultural studies. The real problem is that uh, cultural studies in some departments have also been treated as a kind of merry-go-round. That is, if you have a smattering of other disciplines and if you have a smattering of um, other things um, than what are identified as strictly English studies components, then they think it can be called cultural studies, but that is not so. It demands a certain kind of rigor, it demands a certain kind of political consciousness, and I'm not sure whether all students who opt for cultural studies are aware of these things, even while they try to pursue it. So we need to make them very conscious of what they are with, then helping them to follow a fad, or which is considered a fad. And I feel so strongly about this because I feel that cultural studies is something which requires a lot of rigor. It has a multidisciplinary component, and it also has certain kinds of demands of teachers and students who are pursuing it. Whether those demands are met, we really have to think in greater detail.
So, Chitra, we are in a way living in times of pandemic. Maybe it's over, but anyway, it's there. It's very much in the air. So, we had this COVID-19 for the last 2 or 3 years, and we talk about learning laws at different stages, tertiary level, high school, and things like that. So, do you think that there is some real learning loss when we think about this COVID times in higher education? Or what are the ways in which COVID-19 has affected our higher education scenario in India?
Yeah, I don't know about it in general, but I can speak through specificities that we have addressed or we have had to address during COVID times. You remember that most of the classes were done online during the times. And in Bangalore University, especially where I am located, it's a state university, and so it has a very strong rural population as part of its student community.
Okay.
So during the pandemic, there were times when many of the students could not access these classes.
Yeah.
Because they were located far away and they would have to, where there was no Wi-Fi.
Yes.
So they'll have to rely on mobile data.
Yes.
And they won't have enough money to afford that.
Yeah.
And the university was not giving any support there.
Okay.
So we will just assume that they are there.
Yeah. And you teach.
The students.
And you teach.
And we teach. But it will never reach them.
Okay.
It will never reach at least 70% of the class.
All right.
So most of the time we were assuming that it would reach them. And this assumption was wrong, and it was proved to be wrong when we were correcting the papers of these students.
Yeah.
Because it will reflect on how the communication that we were dependent on was a communication which never reached them.
Yeah.
So, which also means that in relation to people who really needed to be in the class, whoever was attending these classes were people who were well equipped with both a cultural capital and enough English, who attended these classes.
Yeah.
So their answer papers will show improvement because they were constantly at it, maybe. Yeah. And there was no need for them to go for odd jobs to support their families during the time. Whereas among these people who came from the rural population, they just could not afford to sit at home and listen to these, spending money from their own pockets, because they were relying on mobile data.
Yeah.
So they would go for odd jobs.
Yes.
And they will start earning from these
Yes.
jobs.
Yes.
So when finally it became offline, some 60% of the class did not come back
Oh,
to the university
really?
because they had started supporting their family doing odd jobs. And once you start doing odd jobs and earning by yourself, it's very difficult to come back to a system where you don't have a scholarship scheme
Yes, that's right.
to support you.
Yeah.
So I think our university especially was heavily impacted by COVID-19.
Okay.
And we also...
So there is really this learning
yes,
gap.
yes,
Yeah.
there was the learning
Yeah,
gap.
yeah.
And though we may say that, everything became digital and all that, it was not so. It was not so. Actually, it was very difficult to repair the gap.
Okay.
We had to almost tell them that it is 75% strict attendance for postgraduates, so you have to come back to the class. And
Okay.
make them come back to the class against their will and desire and volition.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So those were difficult times for everyone, but it was also difficult times for a set of students who were ill-equipped with both money and cultural capital.
Okay. So thank you, Chitra. Thank
Yeah.
you so much.
Thank
I
you very
also-
much. I'm happy to be in this university, and I'm happy to be talking to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I also thank Kerala State Higher Education Council for funding the Scholar in Residence program. Thank you.